Today, interior designer Yena Jung welcomes us to her eclectic Tudor home in Larchmont, New York. A nearly century-old house she transformed from its original 1970s state into a space that perfectly balances dramatic style with family life. Every room in the home showcases Yena's love of contrast, from the black and white checkered powder room to the green-filled living room anchored by a custom painting her son helped to create. This Tudor home proves that dramatic flair and harmonious living can coexist beautifully when curated with love.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hello, Homeworthy. My name is Yena, and welcome to my home in Larchmont, New York. Come on in. Hi, my name is Yena Jung, and I'm an interior designer, and we are in my home in Larchmont, New York. How did I find this home? It's a long story. I won't go crazy with all the details, but I moved my family here during the height of COVID in 2020, and we were, we were in the Upper West Side of New York City. We had two young kids, my husband and I, and we had done the first few months of quarantine, and then we knew we had to get out. And I've worked in events for a really long time, and suddenly with COVID, the work really wasn't there. And so this was sort of our chance to figure out a place that we wanted to move and raise our kids in. And we picked Larchmont because we had friends here. And we actually started renting a house in this town because, how can you just buy a house without knowing anything about the area? We love the area, we love the proximity to the city, the easy commute. So we were really focused on looking at homes in Larchmont. And we probably looked at 20, 30 homes. My poor real estate agent, we joke that I dragged her to 25 houses, and some of these homes, we would get to the front of the door and I would say, nope, not my house. But by the time we got to this one, I had taken a walk in, and it was in its pretty original state from when the previous owners had renovated it, I think in the 70s. But this house is what you call a Tudor style home, and it was built in 1929. So it's almost 100 years old. It was a project. Like I said, the house hadn't been touched in 50 years. And so when we bought it, we knew that we would have to do quite a bit of work, and we knew that we would have to do it in stages. So initially when we bought the home, we had closed on it in the summer of 2021, and we started with all the utilities, HVAC, electrical, all the bones of the house were there, but it just needed a really big upgrade. This is my living room, and I wanted to talk about some of the really personal design touches that went into creating this space. Before we had done the major renovation, I actually worked on the front side of the house very extensively, from things like skim coating the wall to redoing this fireplace, changing out the hearth, and including some black moments to coordinate with the entranceway that we had done. But some of the art that, is in this house really speaks to some of the time that we've spent here as a family together. So, this painting here, my son and I, one day when he was home from school, we found an old picture of this map, and, we had a conversation about all the places that we wanted to go. So, I had said to him that day, do you want to paint it? And he was like, we're gonna paint on top of a painting. And I was like, yeah. So I spray painted the words, "Oh, the places we will go." And I promised him that as we travel to these places, we'll start pinning them. And I let him just take neon paint and color all over it. And it's honestly been the fireplace mantelpiece ever since. But I don't know, it's one of my favorite things in the house, because I can't imagine being a child and having your designer mom say, this is the focal point of this room. And he was just so happy to create that day. And him and I are very similar. So it's just a really special piece to have here. This shelf, I found it on West Elm. And the way that it came about was that, I have a recessed shelf here. And before the renovation, I used to have a second one on the other side of the window. And before we put that wall in, it flanked the windows. And so, once we had put the wall in, now we had this one random recessed shelf. And so I kept looking at this space, and, I had spoken with my contractor, and we had talked about, pushing into this little nook, but it just seemed so much better use of a space if I could take something and personalize it. So I found this, metal shelf from West Elm, and then I styled it so that, it sort of flanked the fireplace, but it wasn't identical. And I love things in a home where they don't match. So, it's nice to have something that flanks the fireplace on both sides. Yes, absolutely. But I think what's nice about how this is anchored is that it gives you the sense of symmetry without being identical. So I want to talk about, the living room space. I had mentioned that when you come off the entranceway, it's one of the first things you see, and I wanted it to be really warm and inviting. And, with furniture layout, interior designers, we as a collective think that you can't have furniture pushed up against a wall. Like, I always tell clients like, oh, we got to get the sofas off the wall. However, not every space lends itself to being able to do that. And so in my own living room, I knew that there was going to be a couch and it was going to be pushed up against a wall. But I had basically said to myself, there is no way I'm putting a sofa up against a wall unless I can create some sort of dramatic framing around this beautiful lime chartreuse or olive colored couch. I have this amazing cabinet maker. His name is Pablo. His company's PDR Cabinetry. And, he has done so much millwork in my house. And when I came up with this concept, I sent him this drawing, and it was such a collaboration of the way the size of the bookshelves were scaled so that, they didn't overpower the couch, but yet it was a big enough presence in the room that, it could run parallel to the fireplace and yet sort of anchor this side of the room. And I love wallpaper, and part of this installation was that I needed to have wallpaper, and I considered, with Pablo, like, should I wallpaper the inside of your cabinetry? Should I wallpaper the whole wall? But I also love custom millwork and trim, and so I thought, how fun would it be if I could take the wallpaper that I love and create artwork by framing it with trim. So the color of this bookshelf is called Polo Blue by Benjamin Moore, and it is actually in the same run of family as Hail Navy, and that's a really popular navy color that like all designers love. And I had used it in my house before the renovation, but this room has a lot of black in it, and so I wanted a color that was really similar to Hail Navy, but just turned up the black a bit, and Polo Blue I think just gets us there. So my favorite color is green. It's always been my favorite color. I'm a millennial. I always had that like green cargo olive colored jacket forever, like decades. I finally let it go when Gen Z told me it wasn't cool anymore. But green has always just been a really like calming color in my life. And being a floral designer, my husband's a landscape designer. There's always greenery. There's always foliage around. And I found this couch and this color is just so relaxing, actually. Like, it's not only is it so comfortable to sit in, but there's just something about this color that makes you feel grounded, like with the earth, but it just happens to be like my favorite color also. We redid all the floors. When we had bought the house, we had originally just sanded them down, refinished them into a natural color. And the lighter the floors are, the less you can actually see in terms of like dust, dirt, hair, anything. But when we renovated it, this floor, I went with the slightly larger wood size. This is, I think, 3.5 versus the more traditional 2.5 size. It's white oak. In general, I wouldn't suggest necessarily like making up your own floor colors. For this project, for myself, it seemed to make sense. It's actually, it's half Jacobine and half special walnut. And it just has this richness to color that sort of seemed to fit the tones of the house. So I work from home a lot, and I sort of have desks everywhere because when you're at home a lot, it's hard to be just, standing or sitting in one place. So I love to have places to sit and work and think by sunlight. And so I created this just like a little nook where, I can go and sit in this chair and, look out into the neighborhood. Maybe my kids are coming home. And I actually got this chair as a set of 6 with a table that I found on Facebook Marketplace. And I refinished it. I reupholstered it. I painted it. And I have a bunch of other chairs to continue on, but I did manage to get this one done so that I can sit in it. But it was, it was some random find on Facebook Marketplace, and I turned it into something I love. So, behind this wall is my office that I call the she shed. But before we go in there, I just want to talk about what this room and this wall looked like before the renovation. When you walked into the front entrance, it was actually a very long, probably 30-foot living room. And the previous owners had, I think they had 6 kids, and they just needed a larger space. So for us, we needed, a friendly living room, and then we wanted a more formal sitting room where I could call, my place. And this wall sort of divided the space up in a natural segue so that I could display, family pictures. I could put silk flowers I had arranged, and I could put some art up. Like, one of the builders who works for Blossy Construction actually sketched this by hand, and there's a few other pieces in the house that he has created. So it's a nice wall to be able to just focus on some of the creativity. I'm a designer who wants to say, like, done is done. However, there's room for tweaks. I would say that done is done, but just like everything else in life, there's room for like adapting and change and revisions and making things better or different. And I do think that changing your space can give you like new life or new energy into a space. So even though the rooms that are done, I mean, I definitely play around with the furniture. Sometimes I move the chair, sometimes I'll move my desk even, given the season. The color palette of this house, there isn't one color that I would say like dominates the house, but you will find that every room has the same colors, but in different shades, so that even though each room looks different, there is a continuous concept. There's like a soft undertone of how it's carried through each room. So for example, style, yes, I think it's dramatic. There's a lot of black, but there's also a lot of room for white and contrast and having colors that pop off of white and black. I hope it shows the personality of who we are, who my kids are, who I am, but mostly like I just want it to reflect like all the things that we like. Come on into my she shed. So this room is probably one of my favorites in the whole house, and part of it is that it's a private enclosed space where I can rest and I can think, but there is a very large interior window that lets me look down into the stairs going into the playroom and looks out into the backyard. And this window, it was purposely designed to be here, but before the renovation, it was actually just a solid wall. And I believe before then it was even a doorway into I think just a patio. So it's seen a bunch of different iterations, and maybe I'm biased towards this, but I think this is the best one because you get to be inside and outside at the same time. So I love birds. Anytime I see furniture or a fixture or something with a bird, there's just something like very calming about it. So, I saw this couch online at Anthropology, and the upholstery having so many birds and foliage, it just really felt like it belonged in She Shed. And even the shape of it, the curves of it, like it was just very feminine. It speaks to the colors in my home, and it barely fit into this room, but I had to have it, so it's probably one of the biggest focal points here. This room has, before we finished it, it had seen a bunch of different iterations. Like I had put a TV in here, and I think that the architect, Kelly Falloon, and I had discussed the way that this layout would be so that the TV would sit on this wall, there would be a big couch, and I could look out the window. But we're not actually very big TV people, and so I did have a TV in here, and it just sort of turned into like another kid's playroom. And as much as I love them, they have the entire playroom downstairs, and so my builder, Paul Blossy, and I actually came up with this idea where I kept saying that for all this renovation we had done, like I didn't have a space still to call mine. And I turned it into something where not only is it a formal sitting room, but I do really feel the vibes of She Shed, because it's sort of like a bachelor pad-esque place where it has like a feminine vibe. It's designed, but it's not stuffy. We welcome guests in here. My kids come in here and cuddle with me. And I got to have fun in this room. You know, speaking of fun, like I always talk about like making art personal to people, to my clients when we work on their projects. It's really hard, I think, as a designer to find artwork that a client immediately is like, yes, that piece. And, you know, I like to have them think about what they want to display in their house. And for She Shed, I wanted the art to speak to the people that I love. And so I wallpapered it, I trimmed it to just basically make like a big framed canvas. And you know, my kids and I, we painted and we wrote on this picture of this, you know, female silhouette that we had found at a store. And, you know, they wrote all the words that they think are important, like wow and home, you know, just to be happy and all the things that they hold dear. And then some of these other pieces, my son painted this in school. It's not his favorite thing, but I love it. My daughter actually took this and she took a neon pen and wrote, "Lazy is my middle name." And she colored in the bunny. And we just thought it was so funny. This one here is done by a really special friend of mine. She's a graphic designer and she did all the rebranding for my business. And you know, I had given her this print of a giraffe and said, like, can you make me something cool? And it's honestly like the most artistic thing in this whole wall. And then, you know, just to make sure the wall was sort of like finished and cohesive, I ended it with just two pieces that I just think were fun and pink and just spoke to the She Shed vibes. This is actually a random little sketch that I had done at an event that a vendor had made me. And I had planned the party and he sketched it. He had walked around sketching all the guests, and at the end of the night he handed it to me and said, "Here you go." So it just seemed like very similar. So this is my main desk where I work, and I love the idea of mixing old and new. So not everything in a home has to be brand new for it to be nice. This is another piece that I had found on Facebook Marketplace, and my husband had driven, I think, like an hour and a half away from here to go pick this up because it had all the same tones of my whole house. It has the black, it has the green. It just was so like feminine in shape, but so sturdy and dark and almost masculine in color. So it was like a really nice combination. And I work here all the time. After I bought this house, my real estate agent introduced me to this local builder. His company is called Blossy Construction. And Paul Blossy and I, you know, we sort of just hit it off like right away. We had started with projects in this house and we just had this great collaboration. The initial renovation of the house, I had 5 weeks to get from where I was living into this house. And we had done just so much work together that I started thinking that, you know, I design events. I dress a lot of people in my life. They ask me for design advice in their homes. And I started designing this house and we just started working together. We started partnering on things and I helped him with his business of marketing and getting the word out, giving him referrals, and his clients would do the same. They would meet me and say, "Oh, you're a designer in New York. Like, are you interested in doing my bathroom?" And you know, I did 2 bathrooms in town, and I told this client, like, I've designed my home. I haven't done anything around here, but you can talk to any of my previous clients. And that's really how it started. I think it was the end of 2021. So yeah, 4 years ago. And I always say this, but Blossy Construction like changed my life, and buying this house gave me a career that you know, went in a different direction than I ever expected it to. This is the back part of my house, and we are in my dining room. And this actually used to be a much bigger dining room. It was the smaller kitchen, a big dining room, and there was a full wall here with a doorway that went into a enclosed patio. And for us, you know, we don't have these big formal dinners, and so we wanted a small dining area and then to be able to use the space to create a more open concept kitchen, dining, living space where, you know, the kids can run down the stairs. This was the end of the house. It was the exterior wall of the house. And when we opened it up, you know, it took a 14-foot piece of steel in order to support the weight of the house. And that's what's inside of this wood paneling. And, you know, it had a flat ceiling. You know, we had raised it to be able to get all the sunlight in, to get, you know, all of the large windows framed so that this space actually seemed much bigger than it was. And it was, you know, probably the brainchild of my architect. Kelly Falloon was really able to envision for me a place where the kids could come running from the kitchen and then to be able to like walk down into their playroom going down these stairs. When this was an enclosed sunroom, I had originally created the space into my office, and this room had been painted Hail Navy, and I loved it. But in the 70s, I think when the previous owners had enclosed the space, construction just wasn't what it is now back then. And it wasn't very temperature controlled. It was so cold during the winter and it was so hot during the summers. And, we had this amount of space where it was pretty unusable. And we just wanted to get the square footage back into our house so that, our footprint on the first floor seemed much bigger, but we didn't actually expand, not even an inch of the house. And so this unusable space was the perfect area for us to be able to have a staircase dug down into a playroom. After they had dug out the stairs, you can sort of see where the foundation ended. And with the width of the stairs, there was gonna just be a platform here. And it's actually against building codes in pretty much every area to have a landing above the staircase, because obviously it's very unsafe. Your kids could jump into the stairs, you could drop things. So my cabinet maker, who did the bookcase and my kitchen cabinetry, we had come up with this idea where we would build storage, but it would sort of, be utility and design. It would cover the space we needed, and it would, frame the window, but also it just creates a lot of storage in order for us to be able to, hide things away. Even the way that this wall was framed so that it goes straight and then it returns back into the window, as a designer, I had sort of agonized, how does this work so that it keeps the stairs safe and enclosed, but, we don't block the view. And the builder, the architect, and I had collaborated on how exactly it would turn. And then, we had the cabinet maker make a cabinet piece that basically coordinated with the other side of it. And then we had this blank wall, and we found this. I think we found this faux Jeff Koons, mock-up of it at Marshall's, and so the kids have no idea what it is. And so I said, well, it's all bent out of shape, and we love the colors, so let's look up dog phrases, and we can just color it, and this will be the entrance into your playroom. When we bought this house, one of the things that I loved about it immediately was the layout of the house. When you walk in, there was an entranceway where there was a closet and a storm door, and it was sort of a tiny little mudroom area. And I liked that it was separate. So, we had ultimately gutted it to make it more exposed. I put in these French doors so that you could have a welcoming space, but also have it be visible from the interior of the house. So once you come in, there is a living room, and we wanted it to feel like you walked into the house and you were immediately greeted with comfort. So, there's a big comfortable couch with a bookshelf surrounding it that you could, curl up in and read a book in front of the fireplace. There is an opening that sort of brings you into this open concept kitchen. And previously it used to be truncated into a small kitchen, a big dining room, and then an enclosed porch. It's an open concept kitchen that leads from the kitchen to the dining room, and then stairs that we had dug down into the basement to finish it for a playroom. And from the front entrance, you can actually walk in a circle from the living room, around the kitchen, to the powder room, to the landing of the second floor stairs. And I loved the idea that the kids could just run in circles, because that's exactly what they do. They literally run around in circles through the kitchen, constantly chasing each other. And when they were younger, it's a nice way to be able to have them around and not have them on top of you. So this layout just seemed to work really well for us. And from that landing off the kitchen and the entranceway, you go upstairs, and there are 3 bedrooms, a big closet, and a bathroom. We had bought the house, and as people do now, we had a lot of stuff, and I needed a bigger closet. So actually one of the first projects Paul Blasi and I had worked on was to build a closet that blew the wall through from one room to the next, and to make a walk-in closet by taking up some of the room that my son would have, and him being the youngest kid. I actually only recently told him that I took space from his room for my closet, and it sort of blew his mind that you took part of my room. But the layout just sort of worked so that the 3 bedrooms next to each other would work if I could get a master closet in there. And ultimately we have expansion plans to put a master bathroom and bedroom off the back of the house in, but that's quite a bit away. And then we have a third floor, has a separate doorway that goes up the stairs, and there's a full bedroom, closet, small office, and a full bathroom. So we had always kept it for guest rooms. We've had au pairs with us, and now my husband uses it for his office and closet. So this area used to be a much bigger dining room. And what we had done was taken down another wall here. This was basically the beginning of my kitchen, and it was much smaller. But we took down this interior wall so that we could make a more open concept. And we just didn't have use for a big dining room. So we extended the kitchen out towards the dining room. And then we had a very coordinating window put in to look over the sink. And I love the concept of this big window because I get to look out into the backyard where my husband has very thoughtfully, landscaped every bit of it, but also, the sink being on one side of the window, like it's just unusual. Like it's an interesting design decision that we had made to not have the sink be centered. It was like very planned and thought out by the architect, to the designer, me, to the cabinet maker, to the contractor, so that everything lined up exactly where it needed to. And even, where the floor and the tile meet, to where the peninsula starts and ends, to where the door starts, like all of this was, it was drawn, it was thought of, it was mapped out, it was measured 100 times. And so, when you see this kitchen, it looks so open. How do we make a space that is usable for the way that we live? And my kids sit at this peninsula for breakfast like every day. And we needed the size of it. We needed the separator to the dining room. We wanted the entranceway from the living room to be focal point where you walked in and saw the stone. It's Dolomite. I work with this amazing marble vendor in Rye. And this piece, when we went to the slab yard, my husband loved it immediately. And what's interesting about stone is that when it's like standing upright, it always looks so much darker. And this stone felt really dark to me, and I have so much black in the house. I was worried, and I wanted some very intricate marble that was white with like caramel graining. And sometimes you really need to take like other people's design advice, even as a designer, because my husband was like adamant that he really wanted this Dolomite. And we did it, and honestly, it works perfectly. It's like the perfect color combination of like the dark and the light. When I had picked tile, stone, the stain color of the cabinets, like there was so much agonizing I had done because it was for myself. And, it's much easier to do this for clients. But when I had picked this tile, I had actually gotten a sample of it. I think it was like this piece actually. And it had the perfect combination of the green, the blue, and like some of the golds and the black that I love. And I had based this tile composition basically on the design of the rest of the kitchen. So my cabinet maker had, had given him 2 colors. I had mixed the colors together. They're from 2 different brands, and he sampled it out 3 times for us to get this color of stain to work so that it picked up the grays from the countertop, it picked up the caramels from this tile with the blue, and then it showed the grains of the white oak. And I love wallpaper, as you see throughout the house, but to find tile that you could lay out into creating a look that is wallpaper-like, but stands the test of tile, it's like all the perfect colors for us. So when I had picked out the details for, even the smaller things like hardware, I wanted to make sure that I didn't pick up on just, trends that everyone loved. So I was very adamant about not picking brass hardware. And as much as I love it, I wanted something that would patina over time. So this is polished nickel. And, most people think brushed nickel, satin nickel has like a very silver gray finish, but polished nickel, it actually has a light gold tint and it wears over time. So it changes, it like patinas and it turns like brassier and golder the more you touch it and use it, so it warms up. The last part of our first floor is when you leave the kitchen, you come right into this powder room. This used to be a full bathroom, so it had a toilet, it had a full shower in here, and it had a sink over here. And we wanted to keep this footprint of the space, but make it a powder room. And we put this sliding barn door in so that we could hide a secret laundry room. I love the black and white checkered because it's this is an old Tudor house. I wanted to keep a lot of the traditional looks of it, but to make it more modern feeling. So this is actually, it's porcelain, meaning that it's easy to clean and it's durable, but it has a very, old-timey like marble feel to it without the maintenance of it. And things like, I had mentioned I love birds. So I had, I think I had found this fixture and it actually carried the design of this whole room. And I needed to put it in a place where sort of at eye level where you could see it, but I wanted to surround it with mirrors. And I think owls mean, something in life about like growth and transcending into the next stage of life. And that's sort of what this renovation has meant for us. And once this bronzy little owl, my kids named him Alfred. Once he was like alive in here, the rest of the look sort of came together with it's a custom vanity, same cabinet maker. I talk about him a million times. This is viola marble, and it picks up a little bit of purple, which you'll see when we get up to the second floor. It sort of continues. The hardest part of transitioning some of my work from events to interiors was starting over at my age. A lot of people like pick their careers in their 20s, and that's what I had done with events. And then suddenly, I'm in my late 30s and I'm starting over, like learning all these new things. And interior design isn't really about like decorating a house. Yes, there's a big part of it that's picking all the beautiful things, but interior design comes with construction. So I spent a lot of time following Paul Blassi around on job sites and asking him a million questions. Thank God for his patience with me, because without learning how framing works or how tile is installed, how some materials work and how others don't, there's no way that I could speak to any client about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And just getting up to speed on like what is the construction behind residential homes, like how quickly can I learn it, and then how comfortable am I speaking on it. There is part of it that is difficult to do when you're older, and I say that with quotes because I know that like life is so long, but starting over in a career like can be scary, but this is honestly the best thing that has happened to me. So when you come around the kitchen, this is an original structure in the house. There's a landing that is right in the center from the entrance to the kitchen. And this was one of the things that I had loved most about the house, because my kids could literally run around from the entrance to the kitchen, back again and again and again. And this leads us up into the second floor. Right now we're in my son's bedroom, and I've always said I love wallpaper. And I let my kids both pick their own. So my son had picked out this terrazzo-inspired wallpaper, and honestly, when he picked it out, he was 5 years old. I was terrified about what this was gonna do for this kid's room, but it honestly is the cutest thing, and it's, it sort of inspired the rest of the room. So we painted the trim green. He had requested a very specific gray house structure bed. He wanted the graffiti duvet cover, and just to finish off the room, like again, I found this like very, very cool accordion style dresser for him to put all his little trinkets and things in. And it was from a family giving it away basically off Facebook Marketplace. So I love the old antiques with some of the new things that we've put in. I'm not sure when I really started to like this combination of old and new. When I lived in the city, I always gravitated towards newer construction apartments until we were on the Upper West Side, and then we lived in this pre-war building, and it just had so much charm. And when we ended up in a town like Larchmont, or when we ended up in Larchmont, the homes here are so old and they have so much character, and I really liked this idea of like reviving something that had history. And I don't know if it's because as I get older, like I find depth in finding things that are old and bringing new life to them. But, to see a cabinet like of this quality, of this like intricacy, and like how well it's made, like how it has probably been in the same condition for, 50 years, like this sort of ties the room together so that an old home that I have made new gets to have newness in it, but also, it has history just from these pieces that I find. Moving during COVID was a really intense process, as it was for everyone. But for us, moving to a town where I was, losing my work with events, we didn't know very many people in this town, to go from a rental to buying a house. This home has meant giving a place for my kids to grow up. I didn't grow up in a town that was as quaint as this, and we definitely didn't have the means to, live in a big house where we had all our own rooms and all this beautiful stuff everywhere. And being able to create that space where my children can come and rest their brains, their bodies, their soul, their energy, all of it. It's been like such a gratifying experience to be able to give them something where they literally walk into the store and they know that they're home, and they will always feel like this is home. So as we leave my son's room, this is my bedroom, and then we can come in here into my daughter's room. And here again, I had given her a bunch of options with wallpaper, and she had picked this beautiful floral wallpaper. And, she was probably similar in age. I think maybe she was 4 or 5. And I actually love how she's much older now, but it still grows with her. It's not too childish. It has all the colors that we love, the greens, the blues, the pinks. And it makes this room feel, cozy for a little girl. And, she got to pick and style a lot of it herself as well. Things to share, like I had said, I love the new and the old. And this secretary desk, I had driven up to Connecticut to get it from a woman who was selling it off Facebook Marketplace. And, she had asked if I wanted the chair with it, and this was her grandmother's. And she was so happy to know that, it was going to go to a great home that some little girl would love. But, the desk is probably, 75 years old, and it's in perfect condition. And this little chair just fits so perfectly in her room. We chose to live in Larchmont because its proximity to the city. It's only 18 miles away from New York City, but as soon as you get into this area, it's so quaint, it's quiet, it feels so safe for the kids, and they get to run around the neighborhood. There's a little stream that rolls through just down the block. It's called the Brook. There's so much community here. Halloween's a big thing here. My kids feel safe riding their bikes around, and you forget that you're just 18 miles outside of New York City. Do I like my son's room or my daughter's room more? Aesthetically, I think I align more with my son's room, even though his wallpaper had terrified me. But this room, it's so bright, and it just speaks to her personality. I always say that she lives life with rose-colored glasses on, and that is sort of exemplified in this room. So personality-wise, I think it speaks to both of them, but aesthetically, I align a little bit more with my son's. So before we walk into my bedroom, I just want to point out some of the details in this hallway. We had talked, I showed you the purple vanity in the powder room, and this hallway has a very similar feel to it. I had, the trim and the lower part of the walls painted in a very similar color, and then went with the mauve to go up. And I found this floral wallpaper that just sort of, it just brings your eyes up. It gives you a little detail, and I literally put it up myself. I got on a ladder, and then I took a wallpaper knife and just scalloped through to create the design. And in an old home, there's no 90-degree angle, and so part of design is working within the space that you have. So the scalloped, asymmetry of it all just sort of hides the fact that no home is perfect, and it gives it a little flair. So this is my bedroom, and once again, you'll see a lot of green, which I love. I had found this bed cover set, and I loved the mauve. You saw it in the hallway. I loved the green, and part of part of design is finding maybe like one or two pieces that sort of inspires the look for the rest of the room. And funny enough, like this duvet cover sort of did that for me. And the rest of the room sort of, it just kind of came together with it. So again, I had found these really old dressers from, a woman in White Plains off Facebook Marketplace who was selling them. And I just wallpapered the front. I changed the hardware out and made it our own so that it coordinated with the bedspread, which then led to finding a wallpaper that had, a lot of similar colors, but the black background inspired me to then paint the whole room black. And I love the contrast of the light and the dark. I don't want my space to feel too dark, but this combination of the colors that pop off of the white and then the same colors pop off the black, and in contrast, I feel like you get a really nice combination of light and dark. And this painting, I think it's a painting, yeah, this painting again is done by Mario, who is a builder and worked on my house for months and months. And it just sort of felt like it was made for this room. It's a black silhouette like we have in She Shed, and there's the neon that runs through it, and it was just so beautiful. I wanted to keep the lighter moments, so I kept all the trim white. My dresser here is like this very soft mint, which again, like once I had found this duvet cover, like every color from this duvet cover was already something that you had seen in this house. And so it just seemed like the last finishing piece. And my bedroom is the last room that I had finished because it was probably the hardest. And it's a room I spend, more time in than anywhere else. And I'm now able to look at it and say like, wow, it like really speaks to everything I love. The biggest compliment someone can give me when they walk into my home is that it feels bespoke, that it feels like it was curated, that it was thought of, that it's custom. And not because, every detail is so fancy and, expensive. It's more the idea that somebody thought of it, and the fact that someone can come into my home and see how much love was poured in by, me having to design it all, but also every person who worked in this home. It just speaks so much to like how much love, and blood, sweat, and tears that went into making this place. In this area, there's lots of families. Probably most families have children, and we all want beautiful things, but you also have to be able to live with them and not have your children's mess or fun or chaos or whatever you want to call it, like drive you crazy. So we purposely picked materials that would stand some wear and tear and stand the test of time. So for us, picking a couch, it didn't need to be the most expensive brand. Half the time I keep a blanket on it so the dog doesn't scratch it. The floors, I picked the start color. It shows every dust piece, it shows every scratch, but we look at it and think, well, that's how we know that there's love in the house. Like the kids ran around and pushed something over, and that's why there's a scratch. And to be able to recognize that it's okay to have nice things and try to keep them nice, but don't let it rule your life. That was sort of the way that we thought about the rest of the house. Like, we want to love it, but we're not going to get so upset if somebody ruins it. And I've always said, like, I want to have the fun house where my kids come home and bring their friends over and think like, we can hang out here because like we're comfortable. It's been a dream to do this process, from the construction part, working with Paul Blossy and Blossy Construction, and then piece by piece, designing it, making my own, experimenting with it. I mean, the whole process has been a dream. But I don't know that, I have a dream home necessarily. Like I always say that home is sort of what you make it. If my husband and kids and I decided to get a different house or we had to move for some reason, like we would make a dream home again. But definitely for, who I am today, like yes, every piece of this house has been curated with my ideas, with my collaboration, with Blossy Construction, the real estate agent who helped me find this home. Like all of these partnerships in my life make this home such a dream. But is it a dream forever? I don't know. Maybe. What does the word home mean to me? I take on interior projects and I always say this to the clients because I really mean it, but when we start on a project for anyone's home, I like to look at it from a perspective of like, what is the energy of this house and what is it that we can do to make it better? So it's not that there's something inherently wrong with homes that we have to change. It's just that to me, home means a place where I can rest. So that means everything from resting my brain to resting my body to resting my soul, like resting my energy. And there are ways that we live now that, you know, in some of these homes built 100 years ago, the layout doesn't really lend itself for us to be able to rest in our home in all the ways that we need. So to be able to take a space and renovate it, design it, and actually make it a home, to me that just means creating a space where people can actually rest.